What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me for another video. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me and I appreciate it. If you have been following me on Twitter for any period of time, you know, you can always do so at CryptoGlenn, but you know that we have been tracking Bitcoin's movements for an extended period of time now. And we've actually had pretty significant call outs in terms of what Bitcoin and what other assets in the crypto space are going to do. In addition to Twitter, you can always follow me on Telegram at the 6fix. Pause it if you need to so you can actually get the proper spelling of this. But you would know that we've been actually following Bitcoin's movements, and we've been trying to get a gauge of what could potentially happen. Towards the end of April, I had tweeted about the potential of us having a golden cross. We talked about the death cross that brought us all the way down to the downside, just above 48,000 or wherever we ended up at. And now we were talking about the possibility of us having a golden cross. So this golden cross here on May 3rd was really, you know, it was a possibility. They were close. They were about 1% difference between the 50 and the 200 here. And we were waiting for them to cross. However, there were a few things that we should have been paying attention that would have given us probably a more accurate timeline of when these events could happen. At this time during this tweet, I said it could happen between, you know, the next 12 to 32 hours. We're technically still in that time frame. However, there have been some new updates. Since then, we've actually fallen significantly outside of this rising wedge. And the thing about this rising wedge is historically it tends to be a very bearish pattern that shows up on charts. It does sometimes carry the current trend, what it shows up in. So here we had this nice little move to the upside. We painted this ascending wedge, and on this occasion, it did not actually hold this pattern. We actually broke to the downside. Now, paying attention to that, what that should have told us is, you know, there is an M pattern here that formed. And the thing about these M patterns are they're always bearish. They're never bullish, and they always break to the downside. So paying attention to this yesterday, we wanted to try and see, well, what could potentially happen? Does that mean I think that the actual possibility of us having a golden cross is out of the picture? Not at all. I just think it means that we need to adjust our timeline and maybe pay attention to some additional factors here. So here we have that rising wedge that I was just talking about that we broke out of. We also see that same M pattern that allowed us to fall out of that support line in the rising wedge. And again, rising wedges, they are bearish. They're going to happen. However, the thing that happened once we broke out here is it's actually painting a different picture here, okay? We can actually see this a little bit better. Let me just delete that. If we zoom in here, we actually see that these two EMAs, this 50 and this 200, are actually closer than they've ever been, way closer than they were here, okay? Why is that important? It's important because maybe, just maybe, we needed this M pattern to form so that we could fall, so that we could break to the downside, okay? Look at how the RSI starts to taper off as the price action goes down, all right? We needed this activity to happen. Now that these two RSI, these moving averages, are closer, we've got more than enough room to move to the upside and maybe even hang out in overbought territory. Now, the thing about being in overbought territory is if we take a look here at Ethereum, look at this RSI. When you start to see some of these somewhat parabolic moves, it's not uncommon to go into overbought territory and hang out there for a little while. We saw this happening yesterday. So I think if in fact when that golden cross does in fact happen, that's probably going to be the same scenario. The other thing that gives me a little bit of hope here, and this isn't really emotional based, we're actually just trying to use what the charts are giving us to support the actual ideas of what we think that we're seeing. Okay, so let's just bring this down. Let's do a quick fib test here. We're currently bouncing off this 786. Okay, now the thing about the 786 is all the way from the 382 all the way down to the 786, the 78% retracement. It's a steep retracement. It's not as steep as a 100, but it's pretty steep. And all the way from the 786 all the way up to the 382, this is a golden zone. This is where retracements happen. So you're going to move down. You're in the golden zone. You can bounce here. You can bounce here. You can bounce here. You can bounce here. Shallow retracement, moderate, deepest retracements. So what I would like to see us do is bounce off this 786 and move to the upside. If we in fact do start to move to the upside, let me go ahead and get rid of that. I'm very confident that this 50 crosses over this 200. We trigger the golden cross, and we're going to start to move possibly quite parabolic to the upside. Now, what's being said here? We see a few indicators that show us that these things could happen. So let's go back and let's take a look at the bearish case that got us here, because you want more than one indicator to tell you what you could potentially end up seeing in the charts in the near future. And we're on the 4 hour, and the 4 hour is definitely a great chart to use to try and solidify what it is that you think that you're seeing. Okay, so let's start from the top and let's look at this. So prior to us falling out yesterday, we had an ascending wedge. And again, these tend to be very, very bearish, that showed up on our chart, over the weekend that, I kind of created for you guys. Okay, so that's one. The second is we had this M pattern that showed up that normally, the majority of the times, is actually very bearish. That's two. Ascending wedge pattern, one. M inside the ascending wedge pattern, that's two. Let's go over here to our other chart. We see here that the volume throughout the day was actually tapering off, and it wasn't in favor of the bulls, right? And then as we got to about 8 a.m. yesterday, you start to see that the selling volume for the bears starts to pick up. So that's three indicators right there. You see that the volume for the seller starts to move up, and you actually see that your RSI starts to trek to the downside. So that's 4 or 5 indicators that, if you're looking at this, if you're paying attention, signify that, hey, you're probably going to have some bearish activity. I'm pretty sure if I pulled up the MACD, there's probably some bearish divergence there as well. Can we get at least 3 indicators to corroborate what it is that I've just kind of outlined here for the bullish scenario in Bitcoin? Let's take a look. I won't really look at our EMAs here, because this isn't a leading indicator. This is kind of a lagging indicator here. The activity that we're hoping to get, that we'd like to see, isn't going to happen until after these two cross here. So we need to try and see if there's some kind of preventative or leading indicators that we could potentially see that would give us a good indication that, we're getting ready to break to the upside. So the first is, and again, even using this fib retracement is kind of early because this candle hasn't closed yet. But because we're not going to sit around for 2.5 hours, let's just assume that it closes. So if this closes on the 786 and the next candle opens and closes in our desired direction, that's probably a strong indication that, hey, you know what, we're going to see some of the price action or some of the price direction that we want to see. The other one being that your RSI, while it's not in oversold territory, it is kind of hanging out on the lower end of the spectrum. This is kind of like the medium range here. This is like the high. This is definitely oversold. I'm sorry, overbought. And this down here is oversold. So while we're not in oversold, we are kind of on the lower end. And again, going back to the point that I just alluded to a moment ago, this presents a nice scenario for us to be able to move to the upside here. So you could potentially call that a 1.5, a 2. Let's see if we can get some more indicators. Ultimately, what we want to see here is this volume pick up. It's probably about just under half of where, the selling pressure was during the last 4-hour segment. So if this volume for the bulls picks up, that's always going to be a good indicator. Let's see if we can chart a pattern that's going to, give us some fair indication of what it is that we might see once this candle closes. All right, folks, now remember, whenever you're trying to draw trend lines, you need to go from a candle close to a candle open to a candle open. So you want to try and connect your troughs. You want to try and connect your peaks. You need at least 2 to touch without it breaking through to try and validate your trend line. So there we've got 1, 2, and we'll try and do the same thing here on the bottom. Now I can already tell you right off the rip, this isn't going to work because... well, we know this one's not going to work because, personally, I just don't see this candle. Again, we have to wait till it closes, but I don't see this candle coming down to meet this trend line. And if it did, you'd have 2. It'd be a case, but it might not be a very strong case for a descending wedge. You can't go here because it's going to invalidate these candles because you're not actually at the bottoms. So you're not going to, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get any triangles out of that, but let's try and connect them a different way. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. You could go wick to wick. And this is probably kind of a reach here, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I always like to go body to body on my candles, but you know, for this being a little bit of a learning lesson, we'll go wick to wick. So we've got one here. Actually, you know what, that might not work because it doesn't look like it's touching that second one. All right, that looks like that might work. So we have a, it looks like we have a falling channel here. So, you know, what do they say about falling channels? So the thing about a descending channel is it's normally a continuation of the overall trend. However, it can be a reversal pattern that shows up. It just depends on what precedes it. And with 2 hours and 13 minutes to go, if you know anything about pin bars or pinwheels or bar charts, this might actually be categorized as a pin bar. The thing about a pin bar is it usually signals a reversal. So if we can get this to, you know, go up just a tad bit more, close, the next candle opens in the green, I'd be pretty confident that this descending channel is probably going to signify a reversal, and thus that'll help us get to the upside of where we want to be and hopefully get this golden cross to happen. So I'm still bullish on the golden cross happening. I just think we have to change the timeline in which that we're going to expect it. I'd like to see this become a pin bar, signify a reversal with inside of a falling channel. We've seen a falling channel here. We've got to zoom out, and don't ever be afraid to zoom out. For those of you that are just kind of like learning TA, you're just kind of getting your feet wet, always zoom out. If you're not sure, zoom out. So we had a falling channel here that was back mid-April last month. It eventually broke out to the upside. I think if we have that same scenario play out here with these two EMAs being as close as they are, us being low on the RSI, we could potentially see this breakout to the upside, and hopefully we could finally get out of this mid to upper 50 range that we've been trapped in, that has been putting a bit of a stranglehold on Bitcoin. So let me know how you guys are playing this. Are you taking profits from Ethereum? Are you placing them in assets that have depressed price action like Bitcoin? Are you in Doge? What are you guys doing? Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.